Oh, hi guys. Oh,
Hello.
with some sort of Sith Lord there now. Hi guys.
Cozy.
Welcome back. It's day 121 of our lockdown vlog, and it is the 19th of July. I have just about come off my hangover. Yesterday was brutal. Oh, it was a bad one. Like, I'm glad we filmed when we did, because it got significantly worse before it got better. But yeah, no, thankfully I'm doing okay today. A bit tired, but that is to be expected.
Bad for early last night.
Why is that? It was all self-inflicted.
But see, I'm not one of those dickheads who's like, oh, it's your own fault, you brought it upon yourself. Like, it's not fun feeling ill.
No.
And I don't want you to feel ill, even if you
I was ill.
from drinking.
Yeah. Was sick and everything, like a classy lady. But you know, is what it is. Yeah, ordered pizza because I was like, I know what I need. A big old stodgy bit of food in my stomach. That'll sort me right out. Also ordered like a side order from Papa John's do a good vegan range, and they do. Chris hates them because they're Marmite related, but they're lush. There's little like Marmite and cheese, well, vegan cheese rolls. I ordered a side order of them. I managed to eat half of the side order of Marmite rolls. I did not touch my pizza. I realised this is not going down well. Put it to one side for a while, and then later on was sick.
Are we sure it's the booze, the hangover that was making you sick? Are you sure
it was not
wasn't
the Marmite? It was definitely
cheese
not
rolls?
the Marmite. I have eaten those many times, and they are good.
Well, maybe your body is finally rejecting them.
I think it's more likely that it's the hangover.
And you've had Twiglets today.
I have. I've learned nothing. No, I love Marmite. You're wrong. So that's.
I once got so sick. I don't know if I've mentioned it. I don't think I have mentioned this on the vlog. I think I mentioned it in conversation with your brothers recently.
Right.
I'm confusing any human interaction with vlogging now.
We don't talk apart from this.
Yeah.
We just sit in stony silence the rest of the time.
That's how I prefer it. This is a real burden for me, this half hour. I was once so ill from vodka and orange juice.
In the night while still drunk ill, or hangover ill?
In the night while still drunk
yeah.
ill. But I couldn't drink orange juice for a month. But I was drinking vodka again the following evening.
Right, so it was the orange juice was the bit that offended you. Well, that's the trouble with vodka, though, isn't it? Because vodka sort of hides in whatever drink you put it in. Like, it doesn't really taste. It doesn't have like its own taste. It just sort of.
An orange juice is
so then
very
you're like,
nice,
oh, that's orange juice. That
there is a sort of it's quite a tangy sort of acidic quality to it. You can see why it'd be a bit like, oh.
I wouldn't want to be sick it.
No, exactly.
Quite acidic
but
anyway.
It is your body like rejecting the wrong bit there, isn't it? Going, oh no, I won't have any more of that. That made me ill. No, actually, that's full of vitamins. It's good for you. So it's a shame that your body hasn't rejected Marmite today. That it's
Marmite is good for you. Full of B vitamins, mate. It's really good for you.
There are other sources of B vitamins.
Well, actually, fewer than I wouldn't have actually many sources, because mainly you get your B vitamins from meat and fish. So actually, something that's rich in B vitamins is very good for vegans.
Do you know what else is good for B vitamins?
What?
Supplements. And they don't taste of Marmite.
I'm not making you eat it. Can't you just let me be? Live and let live, man.
I largely do, don't I?
Yeah, you just bitch about it.
Yeah.
It's fine. I don't put Marmite on your food. I'm very polite about not kissing you with a mouthful of Marmite. Never done that.
With a mouth full of Marmite.
Yeah. There's the whole mouth of the stuff.
What's that? There's a film where someone like, I won't be able to remember it now, but someone like, they sort of go like, and like blood, or it looks like blood comes out of their mouth, but it's really dark and black.
Oh, I don't know.
Bubbling out. And that's what I imagine it would be like if you tried to kiss me with a Marmite after, and just all...
To be fair, a whole mouthful of Marmite would be unpleasant, even if you like Marmite. It's quite a strong flavour. You need to sort of...
Marmite, it's not for kissing.
I would agree with that, and I really like Marmite, but that's fair. It's not the most kiss-friendly.
It's also not like, you don't want to use it like some, like edible... body chocolate.
Yeah, like body paint and stuff, like chocolate body paint and things.
Yeah.
Use it like
I said that
Marmite body paint.
I feel like that used to be a thing.
I feel like it used to be like a gimmicky ansomizzy sort of thing.
Like I've not seen or heard about that in a while. Not that I used to like, oh yeah, no, used to get through a jar of that a week. But like,
Yeah,
I
just
feel like
on
it used to
toast.
be a thing that people would talk about, or you'd see it in
Yeah.
places, and I've not seen it.
Another one that I think, like, edible underwear was a thing, for just like a Hindu gimmicky gift type thing.
We get the edible underwear that are made of almost like rice paper type
Yeah.
thing. But then also I've seen ones that are like a G-string made of, you know, when you're a kid and you have the candy necklaces,
Yeah,
like a candy G-string.
I legitimately like that.
I mean, I wouldn't want the bit that's been around the back.
No, no, it's very unhygienic, but quite funny. I think they're not really going for sexy there, are they? They're going for funny. Otherwise, I've entirely misjudged it.
But are they really going for edible? Is the thing.
Well, I think technically, some people are into that, Babs.
Like the front bit, sure, but no, I wouldn't want some sweets that have been stuck up someone's butt crack.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
I know
No,
where,
right.
I know
No
where my
Marmite
line is.
kisses and no butt crack sweets.
I know where my line is.
That's fair. To be honest, if you did want those, I would have mixed feelings about that. I don't think I'd like that, and I would wonder why.
Hey, don't kink shame.
I'm not kink shaming people in general, but you specifically
Listen,
wanting my
guys,
butt crack sweets.
If you're watching
that's
this
not
and you
kink
want some
shaming.
sweets from out of a butt crack, you do you.
Go for your life.
As long as it's all consensual.
Go for your life. Yeah,
how
don't be sneaking them in people's butt.
How did we get onto that?
I don't know. Right, so actually, like, I got a couple of things to actually talk about today, and for the first time.
Don't act like that's a novelty.
Oh, yesterday, how did we manage yesterday?
Oh,
Funnily
dear.
enough, though, after we finished yesterday, we realised there was one big important thing that we'd meant to talk about, and we entirely forgot it. So yesterday was half an hour of quite, I think, amusing waffle, because we had no agenda. I was incapable of making an agenda, and that's why we had no agenda. I think that's fair. But yeah, so there's actually, like, for the first time in a while, because we've shied away from real world news for a while, so I think we've been slightly misleading people on this being a lockdown vlog, other than us just talking about what we're getting up to in our lockdown vlog for the last sort of few weeks,
Fine, isn't it?
which
Oh,
is
it's just
absolutely
valid.
fine. But previously, obviously, when it was all kicking off previously, we were quite political, quite topical, and looking at the news every day and sort of talking on it. And I had to sort of step away for my mental health purposes, because
Well, we
it was
had a
just driving
bit
me slightly
of
insane.
A heavy time just privately, didn't we?
Yeah.
Like, not
Nothing
between us, but like just real world stuff.
Yeah,
Nothing
some real
to
world stuff.
worry about, but like
It's
was
just a bit complicated, and we can't really go into details because it's not really our details to go into.
bit mentally
But there was some
fatiguing and
some
stressful.
quite heavy stuff going
And
on,
then
which
so looking into world politics on top of that, we were just like, we get a bit of downtime, we're just going to watch
just like nice
Guardians of the Galaxy
nice
or
candy floss for the brain type
Yeah.
things. So deliberately, like, because I was fairly anxious anyway, I think that sort of swept up a fair bit of anxiety with yourself. So we kind of made a deliberate choice to sort of limit it. So it wasn't that we were entirely oblivious, but even just for like keeping an eye on it, unless it would been like an absolutely vital story to cover, we probably would have shied away from it anyway. So keeping
also-
an eye, but actually then going into discussions about it on the blog can be a bit like, well, I get either very angry or very scared.
It's a sort of a
They're the two.
I think it's a double-edged sword sometimes, because sometimes you see something in the news and you think it's horrible, but we can't actually do anything about it.
No.
And feel quite powerless. So it's a double-edged sword. It can be cathartic to
have a
talk
rant
about
and
it,
to sort of
but also
release it.
sometimes it can be just like you're thinking about a thing, just going, feeling like I can't.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like Dominic Hancock is saying he wants to, in the last few days, been saying he wants to launch an investigation into COVID deaths and saying they've been over-reported.
Who's Dominic Hancock?
Matt Hancock.
Oh, right.
I always get Dominic Hancock, Dominic Cummings and Matt Hancock, and I conflate those names in my mind. I don't know why, but Matt Hancock has been saying he wants to kind of
Do an
have
independent
investigation
inquiry.
into COVID, and I just think, even if some of the things you look year-on-year at the year-on-year averages, and we're way up.
Yeah.
So
like, whatever's happened, it's been a shit show. Like, let's not, like, the argument, I believe, is that they're trying to suggest that the death rate has been inflated falsely, and some of these people who had positive COVID tests months later died of other things. They just happened to have COVID. That's as may be. And maybe
Convenient
that's the
timing,
case.
though, isn't it, when Boris wants to stop following the science?
Yeah, exactly. But regardless, I think like what we've sort of been, well, what I've been sort of leaning towards more than anything else is looking at the excess deaths rate, which Chris Giles, who is, I think, the financial editor, but he's, or might be the economics editor, but anyway, he works at the FT, and he's been doing sort of regular updates based on the sort of weekly findings of the ONS, based on excess deaths. And regardless of what measure you look on it, the excess deaths are significantly high, like not like blip higher, significantly higher, and that is with lockdown measures. So with lockdown measures, other infectious diseases won't have been being passed around either, which will have helped, I guess. People won't have died of flu as much in this period as they would have, and all of the other sort of bits and bobs. Also, certain deaths will be down, like driving-related deaths and things like that. But others will go up. Some mental health related ones, because actually people have really struggled with lockdown, and others sort of as knock-on effects for normal sort of hospital and medical procedures being put off, which may lead to sort of people getting things like cancer diagnoses too late, too late, and things like that. So I'm not even saying that this is all, like, all of those excess deaths are of COVID. They're not. But ultimately, I think more of those deaths could have been avoided if we had gone into lockdown earlier, because we would have then actually had a stricter, shorter lockdown, which would have meant not so many delays with other medical procedures and mental health issues and all of those things. So it isn't clear-cut, black and white, right or wrong in this, and I wouldn't envy any of the people in power having to make these kinds of decisions. I wouldn't. I like, as much as I sort of stand on my soapbox and say, well, they're a fucking shambles, they are, but I wouldn't actually want their job either, because I don't think, like, whichever way you go, there's going to be costs and there's going to be casualties. Personally, I think the absolute epitome of what should have been done should have been, we need to save the maximum number of lives, and we need to put the least amount of strain on the NHS. I think dragging our feet into going into lockdown in the first place has meant actually we have kind of fucked it both ways, because the reason to sort of hold off on lockdown or to have a relaxed lockdown was for economic reasons, so that sort of the economy is still rolling and people are still making money and we avoid a massive recession. And the reasons for going into lockdown were to sort of save lives so that COVID doesn't spread through the population. We've kind of fucked both, which is fun. But yeah, so Boris, I've actually got sort of my little bit of genuine topical stuff today. Is I noticed, basically he did do a press briefing a few days back, just kind of not really saying anything of great value other than sort of trying to sound a bit like of a sort of, we're all in this together, morale boosting, don't look at all of that shit, let's move along, and sort of work towards reopening everything. What he said in sort of giving evidence in like a hearing, but giving evidence basically to the House of Commons and Lords. He's said a few different things, but basically what he said is, everyone I'm talking to suggests that this is going to be around for a long time and it's going to come in waves, and we have to be prepared to make harsher restrictions if necessary, and he wouldn't rule out another national English lockdown if it was required. However, what he said was, we will avoid doing that at all costs. It's something like a nuclear deterrent. You have to have it, but you don't want to use it. And him talking about, like, he has the power to do it, doesn't want to do it. Ultimately, this isn't really about what you want to do at this stage, I don't think. I think if it needs to happen because the NHS is going to get overwhelmed, then it needs to happen. And ideally, you don't wait until it's too late. The incubation period on this fucking illness means that by the time you've fucked it, it's already too late to sort of get it. You can't get the toothpaste back in the tube.
But I guess how it compares to like a nuclear deterrent, though, is sort of going, well, our enemies know we have it, so it's hope we let them know we've got it. And this is kind of in the same way as like the British public know we can do a second lockdown, So fucking behave yourselves, put your masks on, and hopefully. So maybe that's what he's trying to say.
think,
It's like we don't want to do it, so just behave yourselves,
yeah,
and we won't have to.
don't fuck around. Well, like I think that is essentially, again, the onus is very much on the British people rather than taking any responsibility. They can't. They really can't.
Oh, gee.
Well, like the fact that like I don't trust the British public, and I do mean all of them. I'm not sort of saying the English or anything, but I just think, thankfully, we've had slightly stricter rules here, so the people breaking the rules haven't broken them quite as badly, because it would be being even worse. And we're not going to sort of say that we've been absolutely perfect at every fucking minute of this. Like, of course, there've been times when, like more than 2 households have met outdoors. Like, it's like, if you like, you can't really avoid it, but like you can use the guidelines and try to follow them as best you can. The only thing I will say is I've like held my hand up and just been sort of as safe as practically possible at all times, and not taken ridiculous unnecessary risks.
And not everybody can say that.
No, but you know, that is what it is. But the fact that how fucking like spoilt and bratish do people have to be, that now, we mentioned earlier in lockdown, much earlier, that people were protesting lockdown. So they were meeting in big old groups, admittedly outdoors, because you can't really have a protest march indoors, which might have helped it, but meeting in big groups and protesting the fact that they're being told to go into lockdown, which nobody's doing this for the lols. Suck it up, essentially. But now people are meeting in Hyde Park to have protests on the mandatory use of masks in shops and on public transport. Like, get the fuck over yourselves, you spoilt children. They're not the most convenient thing, they're not the most comfortable, but if everybody does it, it means that we might not have to go into another fucking lockdown. Because if we have to go into lockdown in winter, that'll be fucking miserable, because we can't do any of the meeting people outdoors or any of that shit. It will be a lockdown in winter, and it will also be at the same time as we have all those seasonal viral things like seasonal flu to deal with, so it'll take even more strain.
It will also,
like, just put your masks on.
If we have to do another one in winter, let's face it, it'll ruin a lot of Christmases for people.
Yeah, oh
like,
god, yeah.
Last year, we went for Christmas dinner to Ellie's parents on Christmas Day, and we had a lovely time. And your parents do cracking roast potatoes.
They do.
And I will fight anyone who says otherwise. But
probably unnecessary, but
no, I will.
Okay.
To the death. And
my dad will be ever so pleased. And that's really quite high praise for his roast potatoes.
They are good roast potatoes.
They really are.
But it was a lovely time. But this year,
the plan was to go to your folks.
Yes, and I went in very early in the new, I want to say academic year, but that's not how it works. I went in my day job in Specsavers. I went in very early and booked off time around Christmas so that we could
actually, it's been a fair
few
years since you've been able to have Christmas with your family for various reasons, isn't it? So.
No, that's not.
Did you have it the year before?
The last year.
Not
the last like 2 I did have.
Okay, but then there were a few that you didn't.
When I was in my last relationship, I think I had about 4 or 5 in a row when I didn't get to go back. And obviously in retail, it's sometimes tricky because you don't close right up. You just have Christmas Day off. It's not like a job where there's a week off around Christmas or anything.
So you are then fighting for other people who want to go away for Christmas as well.
This year I made sure I got in early, and this year was going to be my turn, and then maybe next year it could be someone else's turn, and we could go to your folks again. And obviously that won't happen if we're in a lockdown, and I realise that I'm not unique in that, but it's just highlighting.
Yeah, a lot of people will be in a similar boat, and actually, even if it's like not a sort of full national lockdown, it may well be that like travelling on public transport is discouraged and may not be considered essential travel, because actually it's not like we can just pop there easily. Like,
no,
even
people whose families are local, it would be ruining it for other people, wouldn't it? Like, for me to get home to see my parents, that's a coach trip followed by a tube train trip followed by an overground train trip.
Yeah. So that's a lot of public transport and a lot of shared air going on there.
And just...
and that's actually one of the... So shops, because obviously shops are indoor. I don't think masks are mandatory at outdoor markets and things, but indoor shops This is in England. That actually isn't the rule here. They haven't said, they've said preferable but not mandatory on public transport. But I think the reason for that is our R rate is so much lower that what we are doing is working. So they're not really seeing the need to sort of implement new measures. They're just kind of saying keep doing what you're doing. But in England, they've had several outbreaks. We've had a few outbreaks here, usually, interestingly, connected with food processing factories. And actually, I was reading a sort of more general piece on the science of COVID and what we know now. And actually, that is one of the things that Boris was saying, which is a fair point, is we do know more about it now, and we do know more about the way it transmits and what's going on. So hopefully we don't need to go into a stricter lockdown again, because we can do more with preventative measures and more with social distancing measures, and we've adapted, so we might as well keep those adaptations. Which is all fair. The thing that seems to be emerging is there's some discourse on exactly how it's transmitted, and the reason why it's well, one of the reasons why it's really difficult to sort of keep a lid on is the length of the incubation period, because you can have it and be transmitting it for a long time without having symptoms. You may never have symptoms and you might just get over it quietly, but there might be a period of a week or two where you are actually infectious but you don't know about it. Interestingly, the emerging evidence is that it's not as straightforward as with most illnesses. The R rate for an individual person will be the average. Like, so for example, with something like measles, the number of people that they can transmit it to, measles and tuberculosis, which are airborne viruses, if someone gets it, on average they will infect 12 to 18 people, I believe was the stats, which is amazing. But with this, with sort of old school, like Ebola, for example, which is known for being incredibly infectious and very lethal, only about 1.5. Actually passing it on is more difficult, but if you get it, you're fucked. This, it's sort of, without lockdown measures and just with normal behaviour, it's estimated to be about 2 to 3, judging by the number of cases there are in the population and the number of people who get it. However, it seems that there's huge disparity in how infectious individuals are. So it probably isn't that, on average, everybody who has it would give it to 2 to 3 other people. It seems that almost 70% of cases, through contact tracing, they've realised they haven't passed it on to anyone. And then with about 20, so I think it was like 80% of, 70% of the cases don't seem to transmit to anyone. 10% transmit to sort of 2 to 3. And then 20% are responsible for almost all of these cases. So super spreader, and they don't really know why anybody would be, and that's it's still too early to know. Like, they're doing what they can into it, but also it's really hard to study these things because we're not in normal measures. But also, just any trials and any tests and any study on these things takes years. And they're working on vaccines, they're working on treatments, but in order to work on those, you kind of need to know as much as you can about it.
Well, the truth is,
and just the data is not there yet. We can make good guesses. But yeah, it seems like some individual, and because basically viruses are, so they refer to somebody who has it as shedding the virus, and so that will be like the amount of virus that is coming off them. Mainly it appears to be through moisture droplets. So for the most part, in heavy droplets that when you sort of speak, they come out your mouth and nose, or just when you're breathing, and then they fall to the floor quite close to you due to gravity, and so then once they're on the floor or once they're on your clothes, they don't seem to think there's too much in the way of touch transmission. It would be, though, literally, like, obviously, if somebody has coughed on that and then I freshly touch it and then I put my hand on my mouth, then yes, of course. But actually, just general sort of touch transmission doesn't seem to be too high, they don't think. It seems very much to be to do with indoor spaces with circulated air, and how much is in the air and how much people are breathing in. But they don't really know yet why certain individuals seem to be known as super spreaders, and they're not necessarily doing anything wrong themselves. Obviously, there are the sort of social reasons. A recluse is not going to pass it on to as many people as a social butterfly, but it may be that recluse is super infectious, he just doesn't go anywhere. So that's like, they don't really know why there'd be disparities in how infectious some individuals are. If there was a way of identifying people who were known to be potential super spreaders, regular testing of those individuals would be amazing, but there's just no way of knowing why those individuals are yet. Is it genetic? Is it luck? Is it like it's too many variables.
It would be really reassuring to be like, oh, brilliant! 70% of the population is barely infectious, except that we don't know.
Yeah, we don't know if you're one of them.
We don't. Yeah,
we've been really isolated. You need to behave like you're a super spreader.
That's it. And unless you know you wouldn't know otherwise. And,
you wouldn't.
And that's the thing I've found.
All of these things you wouldn't know until it was too late. Whether you've got it, all of the way you've acted over the last 2 weeks, you're like, well.
Since they announced the law change in England. That they were bringing in masks as a compulsory thing. I haven't been out very much to the shops. You haven't been out at all.
No.
I've been out.
I've been over the road. I've been to friends' gardens, but I haven't been to shops and
things. That's true. You haven't been to shops or anything. I have, and still I find that I'm the only one wearing a mask. And it's not the law over here. It's not compulsory. But I think if I wasn't already wearing a mask, and then the government said, well, in England, compulsory masks, I think there'd be a bit of me going, well, what do they know?
Yeah.
Better safe than sorry, innit?
I agree. I think better safe than sorry across the board with all of this.
But with the Hyde Park protests, though, they have had hundreds of people. I can't remember if the ones before were a success in Hyde Park, but I know they announced, when they were trying to just protest against lockdown, I know they announced ones in kind of Swansea and Bristol and places that were just big failures. No one really turned up.
They were it wasn't a huge turnout, but it was significant enough to be sort of. I think it was Hyde Park. It was
Hyde Park this time as well, and it's hundreds of people now. So I'm hoping that isn't reflected in protests across the country.
I doubt it will be. It wasn't last time, and I think in London there's so many people. It's very easy to get into sort of a certain area. I think once you're sort of expecting people to sort of get buses and trains to go in, people in London are used to commuting into London, and the idiots will congregate, but I'm hoping that's not reflective of the general consensus. And like I said, when we were down in Dorset, which was a week and a bit ago now, I was generally encouraged by the sort of, because it was the first time really I'd been anywhere where there was sort of lots of members of the public, other than a handful of trips to the shop since this whole thing started. I've not really been among lots of people. On the beach, there were enough, it wasn't quiet, there were plenty of people about, but it wasn't so busy that you couldn't easily keep several meters around yourself. And even on the sort of bottlenecky bits, because there was sort of a little gangway down onto the beach, even with that, we were never sort of not able to keep our distance from people. If you were crossing, you could just stand at the back and then sort of, and people were, social distancing really well in the outdoor, because the place we went to, it was, I can't remember what the pub was called now, but it had a really big field, basically, and so they had plenty of room for plenty of tables, and both days that we went there, most of the tables had people on them. But it wasn't rammed. Nobody seemed to be particularly unruly drunk. It was sort of quite calm and quite sensible. Now, that being said, I saw today a status that actually a friend of mine who lives in Newport has seen. Now, he lives more in the centre of town. We live actually sort of out in the suburbs. He lives sort of not right in the town centre, but in a quite built-up area, and he lives right close to a pub. They've reopened, but only their outdoor areas, because currently that's the rules. We can't open indoor pubs until the 3rd of August, and it's the 19th today, so a little while yet. But this pub that's by him, it's got a very small outdoor area, and they had nothing in place to sort of stop too many people congregating. So basically loads of people were just drinking in the street right outside his house. And he's like, well, I have to walk through these drunk people to go anywhere, and so and there were lots of them, and there was there was nothing being done to sort of be no, we're at capacity now, no, sorry, we're not going to serve you, because they need to make the money. I can't even fully blame the business owners, because they're probably in real dire straits. They need to earn the money, but I just feel like it's not the moral or ethical choice right now. If you can't do it safely, you shouldn't be doing it.
Presumably the government is starting to kind of withdraw certain supports and stuff. They're going to get rid of furlough and things slowly, and roll it back. And I think like they need to it needs to be more circumstantial. You know, and it's the same thing they've done with kind of live venues and sort of going, right, you can open them but you can't do performances or whatever. And I think a lot of this stuff needs to be looked at on a case by case basis. Like, this venue is suitable. I don't know, you know, I realise there's probably a lot of admin involved in that, but like some places could have like a perspex screen and it could all be fine to have live performance, and other places wouldn't be. And I think it's the same with pubs. Some places can do social distancing, it's manageable. The places that can't still need to have some support.
Yeah, they've set up the scheme, which I haven't gone into the details of yet because I need to sort of do my COVID safety stuff for work before I apply. Because basically I think it's like an online checklist, and it's going to ask, basically it's kind of a test to see that you know what you're doing and you know what the rules are and you know what the precautions are. So I'm going to do all of my COVID safety stuff and then I apply for it. But basically it's an application. It's through Visit Britain, which is sort of it's not mandatory, but it is basically a checklist of what have you done, what are you going to do, what are your safety practices, and then if you pass enough criteria they will give you sort of a certificate basically that says you're good to go. Now if your business for whatever reason cannot meet those criteria and you can't safely open, then firstly you shouldn't, but obviously there needs to therefore be support to those businesses that can't safely open and can't reasonably make other choices. I get that there isn't like an infinite money bag that you can just be paying out to people, and eventually you're going to have to accept that certain businesses will just have to fold. But we don't want to be in a position where sort of a year or two from now so many huge sectors of industry have closed entirely, because it's much harder to start from scratch in empty properties than it is to sort of give people the support to keep going. I'm really grateful that we're getting towards a point where we can reopen, and I'm pretty confident on having, like, you have seen my bag of tricks of all of the stuff we've bought that we're going to be offering to customers and doing to make sure the place is super safe. I've got so much work to do, it is not even funny, but I'm going to do it, and I'm confident that we'll be a safe place to go, and I'm also confident that we'll be a safe place to work, because I've got to work there, and I've got other staff that have to work there, and I don't want to put anyone's health at risk. So I will have a zero tolerance policy on anybody who is flouting COVID rules, and if I know you're fucking them up, then you're not welcome, and I'm not giving you a fucking refund either. If you turn up coughing sorry, if you're symptomatic, you're fucking off. But again, it might be too late. But I'm doing everything reasonable, and as long as everybody does everything, or even if everybody does most things reasonable, the chances are, any given time, if you've been being good, chances are you haven't come into contact with anyone who's infected. We haven't actually had, there've been several days, not every day, but several days where we've been no new cases in Gwent, which is where we live, which is brilliant, which is a good sign that even if then I am with someone who I know has flouted the rules, my odds are still good, because the chances that they've come into contact with someone infectious are low, but they're not none. So it's so many things to think about, and it is really difficult, and there's no easy answers to any of this, but ultimately I think it needs to boil down to, if you are a workplace, you need to make sure for your own staff, if not your customers, that you are making it as safe as humanly possible. If, let's say, it won't happen with the escape rooms, but let's say there was a beloved bar in Newport, and then through contact tracing it turns out that one evening they had people in and they didn't have significant COVID safety practices in, and they traced back an outbreak in Newport to one bar. That bar will never trade again. That bar will go under. People will remember the name of that bar, and it will be annihilated forever. So if you're not going to do it for sort of people's safety, do it for your own PR. Because if, let's say, we'll call it the King's Head. That's an imaginary pub in Newport. But let's say over the course of a Saturday night, they actually take everybody's details on the door, which actually places aren't, but they do. And then it turns out somebody in there had a positive COVID test result, and then it turns out 2 weeks from there, 300 people that were all in there over the course of that day all come out with COVID positive results. Then we've got an explosion, and it's all down to that one pub not having the right safety measures. And that's plausible. Like, the numbers are slightly exaggerated because not many pubs will take 300 at a time, but it's plausible. In fact, some of the sort of early outbreaks before lockdown measures were implemented were sort of churches, weddings, engagement parties, indoor spaces where just people mingled, and the rate of infection was huge. They sort of 60% of the people in the room catch it, and that's with somebody in there not observing sort of good hand hygiene and maybe coughing everywhere, or maybe just breathing everywhere. Maybe they just got very COVID-y breath, because we don't know why people are so infectious and some people aren't. So without knowing that, you kind of have to act like, well, what if I am? Like, I every single person I come into contact with, I'm not going to do it to protect myself. I've got to do it to protect them. So you've got to be willing to sort of say to someone, can you back off, please? You're too close. And like, no, I'm not going to come to your house party because that's too many people and it's indoors and you haven't got a garden. So no. And yeah, you feel like a bit of a curmudgeon, really. And I do feel like a curmudgeon. I've got an occasion next Wednesday where a friend's trying to sort of have a bit of a gathering in a garden, and that will be several households, but it'll be in the garden. But I don't feel like I'm gonna go because I just don't feel like it sits quite right with me. And yeah, like just the thought of, if I'm not, you don't do it for yourself, do it for everybody else. Then like do it for the people you give a shit about, because even if you're the biggest dickhead in the world, there must be somebody you give a shit about. Like, you must, if not yourself, like there must be people that you at least don't hate. Come on,
Think, wouldn't you?
do it for the people you don't hate.
Right, we should wrap up.
We should. Yeah, there were a couple of other things, but we can talk about them on other days.
Yes.
But oh god, the other big important thing that we didn't mention.
Well, it's important to us. Who knows?
We'll talk about it tomorrow. Well, there's a few.
Tune in tomorrow. That makes me feel very tune in. That's
in.
not right, is it?
Tune your radios in tomorrow.
Tune into the YouTube on the wireless. And yeah, I don't know what the right click on tomorrow. That's not right, is it?
Watch.
Watch tomorrow.
Give us a watch tomorrow.
Watch tomorrow. I'll be testing Ellie with a logic puzzle.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, I do like the sound of that because I'm a super nerd, but I don't know what that's about. Right, okay, so like and subscribe.
There's no shame in it.
No shame in it. None. Come on, guys. If you're watching them anyway, you might as well give us a subscribe.